Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. Today we're gonna be reviewing Rockpommel's Land by the band Grobschnitt.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
Yeah, just saying the name of this album and the band all sounds like I'm cussing you in some really odd other language, but no, it's not actually that. Grobschnitt actually means rough cut in German, and they are a German band indeed, and this is their album Rockpommel's Land. Now before we get into this, here are some of my favorite bits from this album.
The sun is sinking low. My little boy, where do you go?
So this album was released back in 1977. Now overall, this album came out pretty late in the golden age of prog. Now unlike most German bands at the time, which were creating their own style of music known as krautrock, Grobschnitt actually went ahead and created something more symphonic towards the symphonic prog, a type of music which is most akin to what TS made. Now, this album specifically is quite of an odd breed, and in order for us to understand it better, I'm gonna try and summarize the plot of the story that this album tells in the best way that I can. So you've got this boy and his name is Ernie, and he meets a bird called Maraboo, and he's like, "Yo, what's cooking?" And Maraboo's like, "Yo, we gotta find Mr. Glee in Rockpommels Land, and by the way, he's not a pedophile." And little did they know Mr. Glee was actually a pedophile. Well, at least that's how this album makes it eerily sound like. So anyway, Ernie and the bird Maraboo go on an adventure, and of course the police are chasing them because they wanna, understandably try and prevent a kid from getting to a child molester, but they kinda suck and they're also turned into stones, which makes them ultimately fail. And then Ernie and Maraboo continue their adventure together, and this album has like a bunch of goblins at the end, and if all of this sounds like one bad trip to you, that's because that's quite what it is. So although being pretty odd, this album isn't all that bad. Yes, the singing on here is highly accented in German, accent, and yes, there's not a lot of good emotions put into the singing and the instrumentations, and when he does the impressions, they don't really sound all that good, but I think that the bare bones of an album like this are really quite good. I think that if you'd given this album like written down in notes form and lyrics to a band like Yes back in their prime, they could have made their own, interpretation of an album like this and actually made something really cool out of it. I think that the idea, the concept, the underlying bare bones of it is really something with a lot of potential that Grobschnitt weren't really able to extract the full potential out of. On the flip side, one thing that this album actually gets quite well is the storytelling. Although it is quite literal in the way that it does things, I think that the story goes quite well through the way that this album tells it, and that's something that I kinda appreciate because a lot of other albums are really not good at telling a story, although having a pretty solid concept. One thing I do not get about the story is the fact that the last track has almost, I believe, 20 minutes of runtime, and the thing is that it tells a story using the lyrics and the instrumentations for the first 10 minutes, but then there's like 10 minutes of instrumentals which honestly serve no purpose for the story itself and only feel like they're trying to fill in the time in order to not end this album before you reach the maximum length you can do on an album in an LP form. But hey, I heard some really harsh criticisms about this album, and honestly I will have to object because this album overall isn't that bad. So this really looks like a Roger Dean cover now, does it? Well, it surprised me a lot, but it actually isn't. This cover was actually made by Heinz Döflein. Now he took the liberty in making this album even more similar to a Yes album by making them a cover which is really like a Roger Dean. And honestly, if I didn't know about this album and it didn't have the logo on top, I would be fooled. I would think that this is a new Yes album which I've never heard of. And honestly, personally, I kind of like this cover. I think that it really does does convey the idea of the album in a very literal sense. I think that it does convey the idea of this album in a very literal sense. Much like the lyrics are very literal on here and telling the story, this album cover also really shows you what the story is about. So you have Ernie the boy, he's riding Maraboo the big bird, and then they're going to Rockpommel's land, which is what I believe we see in the distance, and honestly it's a pretty lovely cover and I think it's very well executed. I love the vibrancy of the colors. I love the fact that they play on the 4 basic colors being yellow, blue, red and green. They all look really good, and overall this cover is really nice. I wouldn't say that I like it all that much personally. I believe that objectively this cover does its job quite well and it looks quite aesthetically pleasing. And on top of all of that, the name of the album and the band logo, they look really cool on here. I think the design on here is really what strikes me the most as looking good, thus making this cover a pretty neat one. So rating wise, this album gets a not too shabby 7 out of 10. But I suppose that's about it guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're gonna be listening to Bitches Brew by Miles Davis. I would also like to thank my lovely supporter on Patreon. Thank you Brian for supporting this channel, and if anyone watching this video also wants to support this channel and what I'm making on here, you can go ahead and check out my Patreon. The link is below in the description or in my about page. But that's about it guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Have a wonderful day and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye guys.